Assalamu alaikum. I know all of you have heard the phrase, driving while Muslim or flying, or driving while black or flying while Muslim. Well, I always tell my friends I have a version, a very different, unique version called serving while Muslim. When I was elected to the Michigan legislature in 2008, I did not know that it would make history. We honestly had no idea that I was the first Muslimah to be elected to the Michigan legislature and only second in the country. I grew up in Palestine, in a Palestinian household. Both my parents were born in Palestine. I grew up in the most diverse part of Detroit. A lot of people refer to it as Southwest Detroit. We had 20 different ethnicities. And I do not represent what we jokingly call the Muslim capital of the United States, the city of Dearborn. I represent a majority black, Latino, white population that all voted for me and supported me. When I talk to people across the country, even at different conferences, I always tell them that Detroit made history. The majority African American community made history in electing me as the first Muslimah. As you also may have heard, I'm the eldest of 14. Everybody say mashallah. My mother had 8th grade education, my father 4th grade education. And I know my fellow Palestinians always want to know what village that they were from. It is the first question I get asked when I speak all over. Immi is from Beit Ur al-Foka, not the Tihta, but the Foka. And my father is from Beit Hanina. Deciding to run for office post 9/11 was extremely difficult. I was the odd one out. Not only was I Arab American, but I also was of Muslim faith. I was running to represent a majority, about 75% ethnically diverse community, a majority being Latino and African American. When the word started spreading that I was running for the Michigan legislature, I did get the looks, literally got the looks of she's crazy. Even my father said, Baba, no one is going to vote for an Arabiya. My mother, on the other hand, asked if running for office meant I wasn't having another baby. If it wasn't for my predecessor, Steve Tabachman, who was of Jewish faith, I would not have had the courage to run for elected office. Our story was told all over the state of Michigan, how a Muslimah and somebody of Jewish faith worked together in representing the community in Southwest Detroit. It also took a fellow activist, somebody I respected and admired so much, to say that people like us never think about running for office, and this is what was wrong with the system. Only Allah knows how much I resisted the thought of running for office, but it was Naseeb. I filed 10 days before the filing deadline and literally filed for the 12th district. And name recognition all over the city of Detroit is how races are won. I not only lacked name recognition, my name, Rashida Tlaib, was difficult to pronounce for my residents. My residents still to this day lovingly call me Rashida Tlaib, and it's one of the most favorite things that I love. I don't ever correct them unless it's really terrible. But I always listen to them, and they always support me because of my work ethic and my character, not because of my name. I was the only candidate, of course, going door to door. A lot of people hear that a lot, but it was really important because I didn't want them to just see a unique name they couldn't pronounce. I wanted them to get to know who I was. Of course, I got asked, are you from Pakistan? Or what are you? And I would tell them that I'm from Palestine, I'm Palestinian American. And again, they said, yeah, Pakistan. So they didn't really know the difference. So I did a lot of education about geography and so forth. One of my most memorable experiences was meeting one of the community leaders in my district, Pastor Barlow, who I had known as in my community organizing days. I told him I was going to run for office. I said, Pastor Barlow, what do you think? I think I'm going to go ahead and put my name in. He looked at me, he said, well, what church do you go to? I said, well, that's the thing. I'm Muslim, thinking he knew. He paused for a long time. My heart started beating really hard. And he said, as long as you're not a heathen and you tell them that your door is always open, that will be fine with me. Allah yarhama, Pastor Barlow passed away before he could see me win that election that summer. Serving while Muslim. One of my opponents literally was telling supporters that if you couldn't pronounce my name, you shouldn't be able to vote for her. That wasn't as hurtful as some of the blogs that started. One that accused me of having I love this, not just terrorist donors, but Muslim gas station terrorist owners. I love the addition of gas station. Alhamdulillah, my residents did not know what blogs were at that time, so none of them read him, none of them knew about him. Diana, my campaign manager, who was leaving a very progressive organization, it was a soup kitchen in Detroit. And she came to me very hesitant, and she said, she really respected the fact that she was going to literally run the campaign for me my second term. And she said, on my last day, one of the volunteers said, we're going to really miss you, Diana. And Diana says to them, well, that's okay. I'm going to go work for my state representative. I'm going to go work for Rashida Tlaib. She's the first Muslim woman ever elected in the Michigan legislature. And the woman hesitated, looked back, and she said, they're in our government? And I laughed, but of course Diana said it because she was in shock. She was in shock that people could say something that ignorant and that naive. And I told Diana, we're going to work as hard as we can, and people are going to forget that, this is a woman that's of Muslim faith in the Michigan legislature, but this is a woman that works hard and loves her community and loves what she does for her families. My niece Sonia from Brooklyn, I remember when she came this summer to work on my campaign. She came for the whole summer, and she wanted to come because she asked me for a letter of recommendation. I said, Sonia, I am not giving you a letter of recommendation because I don't know what your work ethic is. You need to come down, work for my campaign, work for me as a state representative, and volunteer your time. On the day of this, she was very active. She wasn't somebody that was very politically active, and she's going to medical school. So this was something of a new experience for her. So Sonia, with her Brooklyn accent in Detroit, was very sassy, and she went door to door with me. She worked extremely hard, and on the day of the election, I got a call. And usually during the day of the election at the polls, campaign volunteers are not supposed to reach out to the candidate. It's one of those rules, you just don't bother the candidate. They're already anxious, they're already nervous. But Sonia had a hard time, and I showed up to the polling site. As soon as she saw me, you could see her physically shaking. I said, Sonia, what's wrong? And she said that the brother of my opponent said, she didn't care who was going to win. He didn't care if Santa Claus, people voted for Santa Claus, was what she said, as long as Rashida doesn't go to Lansing, the capital of Michigan, and bomb it. And she was devastated to see, this is my third election. So it was something of a surprise even to me, but even from a person of profession, a person that was a brother of the candidate that I was running against. And I told her, it's okay, you'll see, we will win, and we will prove them wrong over and over again, that we as Muslim Americans care about our country and care about what we do, and do an amazing job as much as anyone else. And the birth in committee also, as serving while Muslim, I serve as a minority vice chair of a number of committees. And Department of Human Services is dear and close to my heart. I served on the committee for almost 6 years now. And one of the things that I had to deal with was a very anti-Muslim, I call him un-American. He hated that, but he was un-American chairman of the committee. He introduced the anti-Sharia law. He would literally tell people, yeah, President Obama is a secret Muslim. I mean, he really believed all those things that he read online of hateful messages about people of Muslim faith. And so in committee, it bothered him. And I didn't realize how much it bothered him until on the time that we were dealing with the budget, I asked the chairman to be recognized to offer an amendment. The chairman says, I recognize Representative Tlaib. And I said, Chairman, this cultural integration program is extremely important to my district. And as somebody that's born in this country, and he paused, and he said, can I see your birth certificate? As a joke. And everybody in the audience gasped. But what was really hard for me was the fact that, when you're traveling with your family, you're traveling maybe going up north in Michigan, I always tell people, you're almost prepared for those kind of comments. You're kind of on guard. You know it might be coming. You know the stares might be coming. My sisters who wear the hijab, or my mother, we're constantly, when we're together, I'm prepared. I'm prepared to either fight back or give a stare back at them. But this time it was different. It was in the Michigan legislature, and I never expected one of my colleagues to make such a comment. But at that moment, brothers and sisters, I smiled inside because I was equal to him. I represented the same amount of people he did, and he couldn't do anything about it. He couldn't get rid of me. And I proceeded to introduce that amendment and was able at the end to get that line item restored. Alhamdulillah. Thank you. With all of the hate and un-American comments, you all should be proud of a campaign that a fellow Muslim ran. It was truly how we all worship, every day, peacefully, and with determination. My first election, I won an astonishing percentage of taking 44% of the vote, crushing my opponents. And in 2012, post-redistricting, I beat an incumbent when nobody thought I would, where she was representing the majority of the district. And I always tell my friends and my colleagues and all of you, it's not bad for someone who didn't speak English when I started school, a daughter of Palestinian immigrants, the eldest of 14. And I am a true believer now that the American dream does exist, but we really need to define what that is to all of us individually, not how our country tries to define it for us. Serving while Muslim has been a unique look into how non-Muslims see us. It really has. My lens is very different now than it ever has been as a community organizer, as an attorney, as someone who worked at human services agencies. I really am now understanding how uneducated and understanding a lot of the misunderstanding that a lot of people have about our faith. I'm the only state legislator in the Michigan legislature that created a one-of-a-kind neighborhood service center. This is not a district office where we just have meetings. I wanted to run almost like a nonprofit type organization, kind of like a city hall for a state legislator. Where my district was, it was 88 miles away from the Capitol. I didn't want my residents to have to travel that far, that long, to come and see me and ask me for something or request help or assistance. So I created the Neighborhood Service Center. We did 10 different anti-poverty programs through there. It was phenomenal. It was important to me in remembering how I grew up in Detroit that I helped my residents get through everyday issues that goes beyond passages of bills and changes in policies. I remember she's over 80 years old. I don't want to use her name because I think she's really sometimes, she doesn't want to know that I know, I think. But I have a woman who's 83 years old in my district who comes in and gets services all the time. And she always asks two of my staff people at the Neighborhood Service Center, after we've helped her with all kinds of things. I've actually had my brothers go and shovel the snow out of her driveway because her family was so far away from her and it was really hard for her to travel out of her home. And I remember as she came in, she would like whisper, and I never knew what she was saying to them, but she would always say, "Is Rashida really Muslim? Is she really Muslim?" And you know what the shock was? Is because she couldn't take the stereotypes that she saw on mainstream media. She couldn't take the image of what she thought Muslims were supposed to be like, I guess. I'm not sure. But it was really hard for her to understand that a Muslim neighbor loved and cared for her as much as she would care for any of her family members. And we've helped her every year, every so on. And what I love about her is that she comes and she brings gifts for my children. She's always looking at me, and I turn to her and she looks away because she's in awe that someone could care about her so much and be of a different faith. The other story of the Neighborhood Service Center, which really changed my outlook of what we need to do as Muslim Americans, I remember going into, and I visited churches as any elected official does, any religious institutions, and I walk into one in 2012. It was predominantly African American, and when you walk in, you can tell everybody's staring at me like, what is she doing here? Oh, she must be an elected official. And I sat down quietly. And as the pastor came up, he said, "Oh, I guess it's an election year." And he looks into the audience, and everybody stares at me, my heart pounding. And he said, "Well, let's see what she's gonna be doing. You know, what is she gonna be saying?" And one of the things that was really phenomenal about it was Mrs. Rosa Mitchell, an African-American woman that lived in my district the last 5 years, had experienced the neighborhood service and experienced who I was, stood up in the front with her cane, and she said, interrupts the pastor and said, "Pastor, that's the woman who saved my house from tax foreclosure." That overwhelmed me with a sense of, that's right. And I may not be Baptist, I may not be Catholic, I may be of Christian faith, But as a Muslimah, I cared enough to help her and to support her. Even before I was an elected official, I was always supporting Mrs. Rosa Mitchell. I read somewhere that charity begins at home. A true believer thus always prepared after meeting the needs of their family to assist other people in need of help. I say this because as I and Congressman Ellison and Congressman Carson and other Muslims serving predominantly non-Muslim communities, we are exposing Islam in a very, very important and impactful way through our desire to give to those who are in need services. As a story that Steve Tabachman, my predecessor, shared with me about Congressman Howard Wolpe, who represented a very conservative district. And it stuck with me, the story that he told me about him. He would provide services, he called it service politics, and he would provide all kinds of services from tax foreclosure to preparing taxes for free, for immigration services, the number of things that were important to his residents. But he worked on something that was controversial in the 1980s. He worked on the apartheid issue, and they're actually looking to make a film about his work. And as his district became more conservative, he kept getting reelected because of the services he offered, even though he kept working on the apartheid issue that was very controversial. I say this because one day, inshallah, no matter our positions on my beloved Palestine, the biased media reports, discriminatory federal policies, we can continue to be in office without giving a piece of who we are. Islam always plays a pivotal role in keeping me sincere, passionate, and authentic as a wife, a daughter, and a mother, and now with my neighbors as a state representative. I am defined by the challenges that Allah has presented me as a young girl growing up in Southwest Detroit and now running for office in a post-9/11 era. And I always remember my favorite verse in the Quran, with hardship comes ease, with hardship comes ease, with hardship comes ease. In the meantime, we have our American Muslim institutions that are working extremely hard to tell the truth about us, our story. And I want to thank the organizers for the opportunity to tell you my story, and inshallah it has inspired many of you women here that think about taking those leadership roles but hesitate. And I want to tell you, don't hesitate, because we can provide a voice that will create a much more welcoming, beautiful community for our children and for our grandchildren. And I thank you again. Assalamu alaikum.